The midday sun beat down upon the dusty plains of Thebes, baking the mud brick houses until they radiated heat like ovens. Senmut, a stonemason with hands as rough as the granite he carved, wiped the sweat from his brow with a forearm already stained ochre from the day's work. He squinted at the shimmering horizon, half expecting to see a mirage of cool water, but all he saw were the ever-present outlines of the great temple of Karnak, a monument to the gods and a constant reminder of the pharaoh's power, looming in the distance. Senmut was tired. He was bone-tired, a weariness that seeped deeper than muscle and settled into the very marrow of his being. He dreamt of nothing but sleep, a deep, dreamless slumber that would wash away the grit and grime, the aches and pains, the endless drone of the overseer's voice. He longed for oblivion, even for a few precious hours. But oblivion was a luxury he couldn't afford. Not today. Today was the day of the festival of Hathor, the goddess of love, music, and, most importantly, as far as Senmut was concerned, intoxicating beverages. He'd been looking forward to this festival for weeks, not just for the respite from labor, but for the chance to indulge in the special brew, the nectar of Hathor, rumored to be unlike anything else, a concoction that could lift a man higher than the pyramids themselves, or so the whispers claimed. It was said to be prepared by the temple priests, using secret ingredients known only to them, ingredients that promised not just intoxication, but enlightenment, a glimpse behind the veil of reality, a communion with the divine. Senmut wasn't particularly religious, but he was desperately curious. His life was a monotonous cycle of work and sleep, punctuated only by the occasional argument with his wife, Nefertari, over their meager rations, and the endless worry about providing for their 2 young children. He needed something, anything, to break the monotony, to inject some color into the drab canvas of his existence, and the nectar of Hathor seemed like the perfect solution, a liquid escape, a temporary reprieve from the harsh realities of his life. He finished smoothing the last stone of the day, a massive block that would form part of the temple's outer wall. The overseer, a burly man named Khonsu, grunted his approval and dismissed the workers. Senmut didn't waste a moment. He joined the throng of laborers heading towards the city center, the air thick with anticipation and the smell of roasting meat. The festival was already in full swing. Music filled the air, a cacophony of drums, flutes, and sistrums, weaving a hypnotic spell over the crowd. Dancers swayed and twirled, their movements fluid and graceful, their brightly colored costumes a stark contrast to the dusty surroundings. Food stalls lined the streets, offering everything from grilled fish and roasted fowl to honey cakes and dates. And of course, the centerpiece of it all, the temple, its towering pylons adorned with banners and garlands, its golden doors gleaming in the sunlight. Senmut navigated the crowded streets, his eyes searching for the stall where the nectar of Hathor was being served. He finally spotted it near the temple entrance, a simple wooden table manned by 2 stern-faced priests. A long line of people snaked its way toward the table, each eager to sample the legendary brew. Senmut joined the queue, his heart pounding with anticipation. He watched as the priests filled small clay cups with a dark, viscous liquid, handing them to the eager patrons. He observed their reactions. Some laughed hysterically. Some wept openly. Some simply stared into space, their eyes glazed over with a distant, unfathomable light. He wondered what the nectar would do to him. Would he laugh, cry, or transcend? He imagined soaring through the sky like a falcon, seeing the world from a god's eye view, or delving into the mysteries of the universe, unraveling the secrets of creation. The possibilities seemed endless, limited only by his imagination. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he reached the front of the line. He handed the priest a small silver coin, his hard-earned wages for the day, and received his cup of nectar. The liquid was thick and dark, almost black, and it smelled of honey, spices, and something else, something indefinable, something strangely intoxicating. He raised the cup to his lips and hesitated for a moment. A flicker of doubt crossed his mind. What if the stories were exaggerated? What if the nectar was nothing more than glorified beer? What if it had no effect on him at all? He pushed the doubt aside and took a deep breath. He closed his eyes and swallowed the entire cup in one gulp. The taste was unexpected. It was sweet, yes, but also bitter, with a lingering aftertaste that burned in the back of his throat. He felt a strange tingling sensation spreading through his body, starting in his stomach and radiating outwards, like ripples in a pond. His head began to spin, and the sounds of the festival seemed to fade into the distance, replaced by a strange, buzzing noise. He opened his eyes, and the world around him seemed to shimmer and distort. The colors became brighter, more intense, almost overwhelming. The faces of the people around him seemed to melt and reform, taking on strange and grotesque shapes. He felt a surge of euphoria, a feeling of lightness and freedom, as if he were floating above the ground. He laughed aloud, a loud, boisterous laugh that surprised even himself. The nectar was working. He stumbled away from the table, his legs unsteady, his mind racing. He wandered through the crowd, his senses overloaded by the sights, sounds, and smells of the festival. He saw things he had never noticed before. The intricate carvings on the temple walls, the delicate patterns in the dancers' costumes, the expressions of joy and sorrow on the faces of the people around him. He felt a sense of connection to everything, a feeling of unity and harmony that transcended the mundane realities of his daily life. He was no longer just Senmut, the stonemason. He was part of something larger, something more profound, something divine. He found himself drawn towards the temple entrance. He pushed his way through the crowd and stepped inside, into the cool, dark interior. The air was thick with incense and the sound of chanting. He walked past towering columns adorned with hieroglyphs, past statues of gods and goddesses, their faces impassive and enigmatic. He felt as if he were walking through a dream, a surreal and fantastical landscape that existed only in his mind. He reached the inner sanctum, the holiest part of the temple, where the statue of Hathor herself stood, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. He knelt before the statue, his head bowed in reverence. He felt a wave of emotion wash over him, a feeling of gratitude and awe. He whispered a prayer to the goddess, thanking her for the nectar, for the experience, for the glimpse of something beyond the ordinary. He wasn't sure how long he knelt there, but it felt like an eternity. When he finally rose, he felt transformed, cleansed, renewed. He was still intoxicated, but the intoxication was different now. It was no longer just a physical sensation. It was a spiritual awakening. He left the temple feeling lighter than air, his heart filled with joy, and his mind filled with wonder. The world seemed different now, brighter, more beautiful, more meaningful. He had seen behind the veil, and he knew that there was more to life than just work and sleep, more than just the endless cycle of mundane existence. There was magic in the world, beauty in the world, and he was determined to find it, to embrace it, to live it to the fullest. He knew that the effects of the nectar would eventually wear off, but the memory of the experience would stay with him forever. It would be a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was always light to be found, always something to believe in. He walked out of the temple and into the night, ready to face whatever the future held, with a new sense of purpose and a new appreciation for the wonders of life. He knew, with a certainty that defied logic, that his life would never be the same again. The nectar of Hathor had changed him, fundamentally and irrevocably, and he was grateful for it. He was higher than he'd ever believed possible, and somehow, he knew, this was just the beginning. The residual glow of the nectar lingered, a warm ember in Senmet's chest as he navigated the now darkened streets of Thebes. The festival, though still raucous in pockets, was winding down. Vendors packed away their wares, their voices hoarse from hawking their goods all day. The music had softened, replaced by the murmur of conversations and the occasional drunken outburst. The air, still thick with the scent of spices and roasted meats, now carried a hint of dampness, a promise of the morning dew. Senmet, despite his lingering intoxication, felt a strange clarity, a heightened awareness of his surroundings. He noticed details he'd previously overlooked, the way the moonlight reflected off the Nile, the intricate patterns of the constellations in the night sky, the subtle expressions on the faces of the people he passed. He felt connected to them, not just as fellow humans, but as fellow travelers on this mysterious journey called life. He thought of Nefertari, his wife, and a pang of guilt shot through him. He hadn't seen her all day, preoccupied as he was with the anticipation of the nectar. He knew she disapproved of his indulgences. She considered them frivolous, a waste of their meager resources. She was a practical woman, Nefertari, grounded in the harsh realities of their existence. She worried constantly about food, shelter, and the health of their children. She didn't have time for flights of fancy or spiritual awakenings. He knew she wouldn't understand his experience, wouldn't grasp the profound impact the nectar had had on him. She would dismiss it as drunken foolishness, a temporary escape from reality that ultimately solved nothing. But he couldn't help but feel that he needed to share it with her, to somehow convey the transformative power of what he had experienced. He wanted her to see the world as he now saw it, to feel the joy and wonder that filled his heart. He quickened his pace, eager to return home and find her. He reached their small mud brick house on the outskirts of the city, its simple facade barely visible in the darkness. He hesitated before opening the door, unsure of how to approach her. He knew she would likely be asleep, exhausted from a long day of chores. He didn't want to wake her, but he couldn't bear to keep his experience to himself any longer. He took a deep breath and pushed the door open, stepping into the dimly lit interior. The only light came from a small oil lamp flickering in the corner, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. Nefertari was asleep on a straw mat. Her two children, young Amos and little Tia, nestled beside her. They were curled up together, their faces peaceful and serene. Senmet felt a surge of love for them, a fierce protective instinct that welled up from the depths of his soul. He realized that they were his reason for being, his purpose in life. They were the light that guided him through the darkness. He knelt beside them, gently stroking Nefertari's hair. She stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open. She looked at him, her expression a mixture of surprise and annoyance. Senmet? Where have you been? It's late, she said, her voice groggy with sleep. I was at the festival, he replied, his voice soft and apologetic. I wanted to tell you about something. Something amazing. Nefertari sighed, sitting up and rubbing her eyes. Let me guess. You drank too much beer and made a fool of yourself again? Senmet shook his head. No, it wasn't just beer. It was the nectar of Hathor. It was different. He tried to explain his experience to her, to describe the feeling of euphoria, the heightened awareness, the sense of connection to the divine. He spoke of the beauty he had seen in the temple, the feeling of transformation he had undergone. He poured out his heart to her, hoping that she would understand. Nefertari listened patiently, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she remained silent for a moment, then said, Senmet, I'm glad you had a good time, but we have more important things to worry about. The children need new clothes. The granary is almost empty, and the pharaoh's tax collectors are coming next week. Senmet felt a wave of disappointment wash over him. He had hoped for understanding, for empathy, but he had received only practicality and concern. He knew she was right, of course. Their survival depended on their ability to meet their basic needs. They couldn't afford to indulge in flights of fancy or spiritual awakenings, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to life than just survival, that there was a deeper meaning, a greater purpose. He sighed. I know, Nefertari. You're right. I wanted to share it with you. Nefertari reached out and took his hand. I understand, Senmut, but we live in a hard world. We have to be practical. He nodded, accepting her words, but a part of him remained unconvinced. He couldn't shake the feeling that the nectar had opened his eyes to something real, something important, something that couldn't be dismissed as mere drunken foolishness. He decided to keep his experience to himself, to treasure it in his heart, to let it guide him in his daily life. He would continue to work hard, to provide for his family, but he would also remember the beauty and wonder he had seen at the festival, and he would strive to find it again in the everyday moments of his life. The next morning, Senmut awoke before dawn, his head throbbing slightly from the nectar. He went outside and looked up at the sky. The stars were still visible, shimmering in the pre-dawn light. He felt a sense of peace and tranquility, a feeling that everything was going to be all right. He knew that life would continue to be difficult, that there would be challenges and hardships ahead, but he also knew that he had the strength to face them, that he had the inner resources to overcome any obstacle. He was no longer just Senmut, the stonemason. He was Senmut, the seeker of truth, the lover of beauty, the champion of life. He went back inside and woke Nefertari. He helped her prepare breakfast, and they ate together in silence. He looked at her across the table, her face tired but determined. He realized that she was his anchor, his rock, his partner in this journey. He loved her deeply, not just for her practicality and her strength, but for her unwavering devotion to their family. He knew that they would face the future together, hand in hand, through thick and thin. He was grateful for her presence in his life, and he vowed to be a better husband, a better father, a better man. After breakfast, he went to work at the temple. The sun was already blazing hot, and the air was thick with dust. He joined the other laborers, lifting stones and hauling them into place. The work was hard and monotonous, but he didn't mind. He found a sense of satisfaction in the physical labor, in the act of creating something lasting and beautiful. He looked at the temple, its towering pylons reaching towards the sky. He saw it now not just as a monument to the pharaoh's power, but as a symbol of human ingenuity and perseverance. He felt proud to be a part of its construction, to contribute to its grandeur. As he worked, he noticed something strange. One of the priests, a young man named Amenhotep, was watching him intently. Amenhotep was known for his aloofness and his intellectual pursuits. He rarely interacted with the laborers, preferring to spend his time studying ancient texts and performing religious rituals. Senmut wondered why he was being singled out. He tried to avoid eye contact, but Amenhotep continued to stare at him. Finally, during a break, Amenhotep approached him. "Senmut, isn't it?" Amenhotep asked, his voice soft and measured. "Yes, that's me," Senmut replied, surprised. "I saw you at the festival last night," Amenhotep said. "I saw you drink the nectar of Hathor." Senmut felt a surge of apprehension. He wondered if he had done something wrong, if he had violated some sacred rule. "Yes, I did," he admitted. Amenhotep smiled. "And did you find it enlightening?" Senmut hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, I did. It was transformative." Amenhotep's smile widened. "I thought so. I have been watching you since. The goddess Hathor has chosen you. She has a task for you." Senmut was stunned. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. "A task? For me?" "Yes," Amenhotep said. "A task that will change your life, and perhaps the fate of Egypt." Senmut stared at Amenhotep, his mind reeling. He had no idea what to expect, but he knew that his life was about to take another unexpected turn. The nectar of Hathor had opened a door, and he was about to step through it, into the unknown. The heat of the day seemed to intensify. The weight of the stone in his hands became almost unbearable. He braced himself, ready for whatever challenge lay ahead. He was Senmut, the chosen one, and he was ready to serve the goddess Hathor. Amenhotep's words hung in the air like the scent of incense, thick and heavy with unspoken meaning. Senmut, still reeling from the priest's pronouncement, could only stare back, speechless. The midday sun beat down relentlessly, blurring the edges of reality, making Amenhotep's face appear both ethereal and intensely real. The other laborers continued their work, oblivious to the momentous conversation unfolding between the stonemason and the priest. The rhythmic clang of hammers and the scraping of stone against stone formed a dissonant soundtrack to Senmut's growing unease. Chosen? A task? For him, a simple stonemason? It seemed absurd, almost laughable. Yet Amenhotep's earnest gaze and the unwavering conviction in his voice convinced Senmut that he was not joking. What kind of task? Senmut finally stammered, breaking the silence. His voice sounded hollow and distant, even to his own ears. Amenhotep's expression turned serious, his eyes darkening with an intensity that made Senmut instinctively step back. A task of great importance, Senmut. A task that requires courage, discretion, and a willingness to embrace the unknown. Hathor has revealed to me that a great darkness is gathering in the land, a shadow that threatens to engulf all that we hold dear. It is a darkness that emanates from the heart of the pharaoh himself. Senmut gasped, his eyes widening in disbelief. To speak of the pharaoh in such terms, even in a hushed whisper, was an act of treason, punishable by death. He glanced around nervously, fearing that someone might have overheard their conversation. "The pharaoh? What are you saying?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Amenhotep lowered his voice even further, leaning closer to Senmut. "I cannot reveal everything at this moment. Suffice it to say that the pharaoh is not who he seems. He is under the influence of a malevolent force, a power that is corrupting his mind and turning him against the gods. He is enacting policies that are detrimental to the people, neglecting the temples, and engaging in rituals that are unholy." Senmut's mind raced, trying to make sense of Amenhotep's accusations. He had always believed in the divine right of the pharaoh, in the sacred connection between the ruler and the gods. The idea that the pharaoh could be corrupted, that he could be a vessel for evil, was a terrifying prospect. But how is this possible? The pharaoh is chosen by the gods. He is their representative on earth. Amenhotep sighed. Even the chosen can be swayed, Senmut. Even the most righteous can fall from grace. The darkness is subtle, insidious. It whispers promises of power and glory, of immortality and dominion. It preys on ambition and greed, on fear and insecurity. The pharaoh, for all his greatness, is still human. He is vulnerable to temptation, just like the rest of us. He paused, studying Senmut's face intently. "Hathor has chosen you, Senmut, because you are different. You are not a priest, not a noble, not a soldier. You are a simple man, grounded in the realities of everyday life. You have seen the struggles of the people. You have felt their pain. You have shared their hopes and dreams. You are not easily swayed by power or prestige. You are honest, loyal, and courageous. These are the qualities that Hathor seeks." Senmut was overwhelmed by Amenhotep's words. He had never considered himself to be anything special, anything extraordinary. He was just a stonemason, a husband, a father. But now he was being told that he was chosen, that he possessed qualities that made him uniquely suited to confront a great evil. The weight of the responsibility settled heavily on his shoulders. "But I don't understand. What can I do? I'm just one man. What can I possibly do against the pharaoh? Amenhotep smiled enigmatically. You are not alone, Senmut. Hathor will guide you. I will assist you. And there are others. Others who share our concerns. Others who are willing to risk everything to protect Egypt. Together, we can expose the pharaoh's corruption and restore balance to the land. But it will not be easy. It will be dangerous. We will face powerful enemies. We will have to make difficult choices. Are you willing to accept this task, Senmut? Are you willing to fight for the future of Egypt? Senmut looked into Amenhotep's eyes, searching for any sign of deception or manipulation. He saw only sincerity and determination. He thought of Nefertari and his children, of the life he had built for them. He knew that accepting this task would put them all in danger, but he also knew that he couldn't stand idly by while the pharaoh led Egypt down a path of destruction. The memory of the nectar of Hathor flooded his mind, the feeling of connection to something larger than himself, the sense of purpose and clarity. He knew that he had to do something, that he couldn't ignore the call of the goddess. He took a deep breath and met Amenhotep's gaze. Yes, he said, his voice firm and resolute. I accept. I will do whatever it takes to protect Egypt. Amenhotep's face lit up with relief. Good. I knew I could count on you. Now, listen carefully. I will need you to gather information. I need you to observe the pharaoh's actions, to listen to his advisors, to learn about his rituals. I need you to be my eyes and ears within the palace. Senmut frowned. But how can I get into the palace? I'm just a stonemason. I have no access to the pharaoh. Amenhotep smiled. That is where Hathor's guidance comes in. I have arranged for you to be transferred to the palace construction project. They are building a new wing, a secret chamber for the pharaoh's personal use. Your skills as a stonemason are highly valued. You will have access to the palace grounds, and you will be able to observe the pharaoh's activities without arousing suspicion. Senmut was amazed by Amenhotep's resourcefulness. He had already anticipated his concerns and found a solution. When do I start? He asked. Tomorrow, Amenhotep replied. Be ready at dawn. I will arrange for a cart to pick you up. And remember, Senmut, discretion is paramount. Do not speak of this to anyone, not even your wife. The pharaoh's spies are everywhere. We cannot afford to be discovered. Senmut nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. I understand. I will be careful. Amenhotep placed a hand on Senmut's shoulder. Hathor is with you, Senmut. Trust in her guidance, and we will prevail. Amenhotep turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of laborers. Senmut watched him go, his mind buzzing with a mixture of fear and excitement. He was now a part of something much larger than himself, a secret conspiracy to overthrow the pharaoh and save Egypt. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew that he was ready to face it, armed with courage, determination, and the unwavering support of the goddess Hathor. He returned to his work, but his mind was no longer on the stones he was carving. He was already planning his strategy, preparing himself for the dangerous task that lay ahead. The nectar of Hathor had indeed changed his life, and in ways he could never have imagined. He was higher than he'd ever believed, not just in spirit, but in purpose. He was ready to climb. The dawn arrived, cloaked in a hazy ochre, painting the Theban sky with streaks of fiery orange and muted gold. Senmut, his stomach churning with a mixture of apprehension and resolve, stood outside his humble dwelling, a small bundle of belongings clutched tightly in his hand. Nefertari, her face etched with concern, stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. He hadn't told her the truth, of course. He couldn't risk her safety, couldn't burden her with the weight of his secret. He had simply told her that he had been chosen for a special project at the palace, a prestigious assignment that would bring them more wealth and security. She had seemed relieved, though a flicker of suspicion still danced in her eyes. He hated lying to her, but he knew it was necessary. Be careful, Senmut, she said, her voice barely a whisper. The palace is a dangerous place. The pharaoh is a demanding man. Don't let your ambition get the better of you. Senmut forced a smile. I will be careful, Nefertari. I promise. I'm doing this for us, for our children. This is our chance to build a better life. Nefertari nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. She pulled him into a tight embrace, her body trembling slightly. Come back to us, safe, Senmut. That's all I ask. Senmut kissed her forehead, his heart aching with guilt and love. I will, Nefertari. I will always come back to you. A rickety cart, pulled by a pair of emaciated donkeys, rattled to a halt in front of their house. Desi'i's gruff-looking man with a whip slung over his shoulder beckoned Senmut to climb aboard. Come on, stonemason. We haven't got all day. The pharaoh is waiting. Senmut nodded, his stomach lurching again. He squeezed Nefertari's hand one last time and climbed onto the cart. He looked back at her as the cart pulled away, her figure growing smaller and smaller in the distance. He felt a pang of regret, a longing for the simple life he was leaving behind. But he also felt a surge of determination, a conviction that he was doing the right thing, that he was fighting for something greater than himself. The journey to the palace was long and arduous. The cart bumped and swayed along the dusty roads, jostling Senmut from side to side. The sun beat down mercilessly, baking the earth and turning the air into a shimmering haze. He passed through crowded marketplaces and bustling workshops, past fields of wheat and barley, past rows of mud brick houses that looked identical to his own. He saw the faces of the people, their expressions a mixture of weariness and resilience. He remembered Amenhotep's words about the darkness that was gathering in the land, about the pharaoh's corruption and the plight of the people. He knew that he couldn't turn back, that he had a responsibility to act, to fight for the future of Egypt. Finally, the cart reached the palace gates, towering structures of granite and gold, adorned with intricate carvings of gods and goddesses. Soldiers in gleaming armor stood guard, their faces stern and impassive. The palace complex stretched out before him, a sprawling labyrinth of courtyards, temples, and residential quarters. It was a city within a city, a testament to the pharaoh's power and wealth. Senmut felt a sense of awe and intimidation. He had never seen anything so grand, so opulent. He felt like a small, insignificant ant entering a vast and complex anthill. The cart was stopped at the gate, and the soldiers demanded to see Senmut's papers. The gruff driver presented the documents, and the soldiers scrutinized them carefully. After what seemed like an eternity, they were finally waved through. The cart rumbled through the gate and into the palace grounds. Senmut's eyes darted around, taking in the sights and sounds. He saw priests in white robes chanting prayers, scribes hunched over scrolls, servants scurrying about with trays of food and drink, nobles in elaborate costumes gossiping and scheming. It was a hive of activity, a microcosm of Egyptian society. The cart eventually stopped at a construction site on the far side of the palace complex. A half-finished wing of the palace loomed overhead, its walls scarred with unfinished carvings, and its foundations littered with stroidalni materiala. A group of laborers, their bodies glistening with sweat, were hauling stones and mixing mortar. An overseer, a tall, muscular man with a whip in his hand, barked orders at them. All right, you lazy dogs, get back to work. The pharaoh wants this wing completed by the next full moon. He doesn't want any excuses. The gruff driver pointed to Senmut. Here's your new stonemason, Khepri. He's supposed to be one of the best in Thebes. Khepri, the overseer, looked Senmut up and down, his expression skeptical. We'll see about that. I don't care how good he is. If he doesn't work hard, he'll be sleeping with the pigs. Now, get to work. There's plenty to do. Senmut nodded, his heart sinking slightly. He knew that life at the palace wouldn't be easy. He would have to work hard and prove himself to Khepri, but he also knew that he had a higher purpose, a secret mission to fulfill. He couldn't afford to be distracted by the hardships of his labor. He had to remain focused on his task, to observe the pharaoh, to gather information, to expose the corruption that was poisoning the land. He joined the other laborers, picking up a chisel and hammer and beginning to carve a block of stone. The work was physically demanding, but Senmut was used to it. He lost himself in the rhythm of the work, the steady tap, tap, tap of the hammer against the chisel. He tried to blend in with the other laborers, to avoid drawing attention to himself. He listened to their conversations, hoping to glean some information about the pharaoh or the palace intrigues, but most of them were only interested in complaining about their work or gossiping about their fellow laborers. As the days passed, Senmut slowly began to acclimate to life at the palace. He learned the names of the other laborers, the routines of the guards, the layout of the construction site. He observed Khepri, the overseer, and discovered that he was a cruel and demanding man, but also fair and honest. He didn't tolerate laziness or incompetence, but he also rewarded hard work and loyalty. Senmut also began to observe the pharaoh. He saw him on several occasions, walking through the palace grounds with his retinue of advisors and guards. The pharaoh was a tall, imposing man with a regal bearing and a stern expression. He seemed distant and aloof, as if he were living in a different world from the rest of the people. Senmut noticed that the pharaoh was always surrounded by a group of priests, their faces masked with an unsettling piety. He also noticed that the pharaoh often disappeared into the unfinished wing of the palace, the secret chamber that was being built for his personal use. Senmut knew that this chamber was the key to unraveling the pharaoh's corruption. He had to find a way to get inside. One evening, as Senmut was returning to his quarters, he saw Amenhotep standing in the shadows. He approached him cautiously. "Amenhotep, what are you doing here? It's dangerous for you to be seen." Amenhotep smiled. "I know, but I had to see you. I have information. The pharaoh is planning a special ritual in the secret chamber on the night of the next full moon. It is said that this ritual will grant him immense power, but it will also require a terrible sacrifice." Senmut gasped. "A sacrifice? What kind of sacrifice?" Amenhotep's face grew grim. "A human sacrifice, Senmut. The pharaoh intends to sacrifice a young child to appease the dark gods he worships." Senmut felt a surge of anger and horror. "We can't let that happen. We have to stop him." Amenhotep nodded. "I know. That's why I'm here. I have a plan. I can get you into the secret chamber on the night of the ritual. You will have to stop the pharaoh before he can complete the sacrifice." Senmut's heart pounded in his chest. "How can you get me in?" "The chamber is heavily guarded." Amenhotep smiled. "I have my ways. Trust me, Senmut. I will guide you. Be ready on the night of the full moon. I will meet you at the entrance to the secret chamber at midnight. And remember, Senmut, the fate of Egypt rests on your shoulders." Amenhotep disappeared back into the shadows, leaving Senmut alone with his thoughts. The weight of the responsibility settled heavily on him once more. He knew that he was walking into a trap, that he was risking his life, but he also knew that he couldn't stand idly by while the pharaoh committed such a heinous act. He had to act, to fight for the innocent, to save Egypt from the darkness that was engulfing it. He looked up at the sky, at the rising moon, its pale light casting long, eerie shadows across the palace grounds. The night of the full moon was approaching, and with it, the moment of truth. He was higher than he'd ever believed, and he was about to face his greatest test. He prayed to Hathor for strength. The night of the full moon arrived, a night pregnant with anticipation and dread. The moon hung heavy in the inky sky, casting an ethereal glow upon the palace grounds, bathing the granite walls in a silvery light. Senmut, his heart pounding in his chest, waited nervously in the shadows near the entrance to the secret chamber, the air thick with the scent of incense and the distant sound of chanting. He clutched a makeshift weapon, a sharpened chisel he had fashioned from his stonemason tools. its cold steel a stark contrast to the sweat slicking his palms. He had spent the day in a state of heightened alertness, his senses hyper-attuned to every sound, every movement. He had tried to eat, but his stomach was knotted with anxiety. He had tried to pray, but his mind was too cluttered with fear and doubt. He felt utterly alone, a solitary figure standing against an overwhelming force. He glanced at the entrance to the chamber, a heavy wooden door reinforced with iron bands, guarded by two hulking soldiers in full battle armor. They stood motionless, their faces hidden behind metal masks, their spears held at the ready. Senmut knew that getting past them would be no easy task. He had to rely on Amenhotep's plan, on the priest's promise of safe passage. He hoped, with a desperate fervor, that Amenhotep would arrive soon. As the clock tower chimed midnight, its mournful tones echoing across the palace grounds, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Amenhotep, his face pale and drawn, his eyes filled with a mixture of determination and fear. He approached Senmut cautiously, his movements furtive and secretive. "Senmut," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Are you ready?" Senmut nodded, his throat too constricted to speak. He clutched his chisel tighter, his knuckles turning white. Amenhotep gestured towards the guards. "I have taken care of them. They will not be a problem. But we must be quick. The ritual has already begun." Senmut followed Amenhotep as they crept towards the guards. As they drew closer, Senmut saw that the guards were slumped against the door, their eyes closed, their breathing shallow. They had been drugged. Amenhotep had somehow managed to incapacitate them without raising an alarm. Amenhotep produced a small key from his robes and unlocked the heavy wooden door. He pushed it open slightly, revealing a dimly lit corridor leading into the depths of the secret chamber. "Go," he whispered. "Hathor is with you." Senmut took a deep breath and stepped through the doorway into the darkness. The door creaked shut behind him, plunging him into absolute silence. He felt a shiver run down his spine, a sense of foreboding that chilled him to the bone. The corridor was narrow and winding, its walls lined with hieroglyphs that seemed to writhe and twist in the flickering light of the torches. The air was thick with the smell of incense and something else, something acrid and unpleasant, something that reminded him of death. He followed the corridor deeper and deeper into the chamber, his senses on high alert, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hear the faint sound of chanting growing louder with each step, a low, guttural drone that sent shivers down his spine. Finally, the corridor opened into a large, circular chamber. The chamber was illuminated by a series of torches placed around the perimeter, casting eerie shadows on the walls. In the center of the chamber, a group of priests in black robes stood around a stone altar. The pharaoh stood before the altar, his face masked with a grotesque golden mask, his hands raised in supplication. On the